have read Outlander?
And when I turned 35, I said to myself, well, you know, Mozart was dead at 36, maybe you better get a move on. So I said, okay, my next birthday, I'm going to start writing a novel, just to learn how. Because to this point, I had written all kinds of stuff. You can't get a PhD and a few other degrees without writing a bunch of stuff. My PhD dissertation was a 400-page monograph entitled Nest Site in the Pinyon Jay, Gymnovinus cyanencephalus. Or, as my husband says, why birds build nests where they do, and who cares anyway? As you will notice, I did not marry a bum. I married a very nice man, whom I still have 47 years later. I was going to write a book, and I had written all kinds of things, writing software reviews or whatever. Nobody told me how. I just read a few, and then I wrote one and looked to see if it looked right, and if it didn't, I poked it till it did. I said, okay, you've been reading novels for the last 30-odd years. Surely if you write one, you will recognize it. And so I said, okay, I'm going to write a novel. You have to learn how. And I said, I need to know what does it take in terms of mental discipline, and daily commitment, and organization, and research, and all these things I don't know. I think the only way to learn that is to actually write a novel. So I said, fine, I'm going to write a novel for practice. I'm not going to tell anyone what I'm doing. I'm not going to try to publish it. It's just for me to learn how to write a novel. Okay, so the next question was, well, what kind of book am I going to write for practice? Because I read everything and lots of it. And I thought for a bit, and I said, well, maybe a mystery. I read a lot of mysteries. And I said, no, mysteries have plots. I'm not sure I can do that. And so I said, okay, what's the easiest thing I could write for practice? And so I thought for a bit. I said, well, for me, perhaps historical fiction. Because I was a research professor. I knew my way around a library. So it seems easier to look things up than to make things up. And if I turn out to have no imagination, I can steal things from the historical. But one day I was watching a really old rerun of Doctor Who on public television. But in this show, the Doctor, his premise is that the Doctor is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey who travels through space and time having adventures. And along the way, he picks up companions from different periods of Earth's history because he thinks Earthlings are funny. And in this particular show, he had picked up a young Scotsman from 1745. And this was a young man in 1819 who appeared in his kilt. And I said, well, that's rather fetching. I found myself thinking about this next day in church, and I said to myself, you know, you want to write a book, it doesn't really matter where you said it. The important thing is to pick a point and get started. I said, fine, Scotland, 18th century. But anyway, that's where I began. And so the only thing that I actually knew about novels was that they should have conflict. So I went immediately to the university library, and I began looking up Scotland in the 18th century. Anyway, I went home with my whole armload of books and began looking for conflict in the 18th century in Scotland. Well, you don't do that for very long without running smack into Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Jacobite Rising in 45. I said, yeah, that looks like a lot of conflict. Fine, we'll use that. But I think it would be a good idea if I had a female character to play off these guys that have sexual tension. That's conflict, that's good. So I introduced this English woman. No idea who she was, what she was doing there, what she was called, what she was going to do in the story. But I induced her into a cottage full of Scotsmen to see what she'd do. When she walked in, and they're all crouched around the hearth muttering to each other. They turned around and stared at her. And I'm thinking, why? Does she look funny? What's going on here? Anyway, one of them got up and he said, my name's Dougal Mackenzie, and who might you be? And without my stopping to think, I just typed, my name's Claire Elizabeth Beecham, and who the hell are you? So I fought with her for several pages, trying to beat her into shape and make her talk like an 18th century person. And she was having none of it. She just kept making smart-ass modern remarks. I said, no one's ever going to see this. It doesn't matter what bizarre thing I do. Go ahead and be modern. I'll figure out how you got there later. So it's all her fault that this has time travel in it. So there we were. And I began working away on this. Okay, there's a reason why I write long books. It's because I like digressions. As a result of this science software and earning extra money doing that, one day Byte magazine sent me a software package to review, and with it a disk for 5 free hours of connect time at CompuServe. There was no internet. I mean, it didn't exist. What we had were 3 information services, Genie, Delphi, and CompuServe. But at the time, that was the online world. Well, these information services each had forums or special interest groups for people who like old cars or gardening or books or whatever. Well, this particular software vendor had put up a support forum on CompuServe to service this new software package. And so I did. and spent an hour exploring it and worked. I wrote the review. Well, I had 4 hours of free connect time left. And I'm not Scottish, but I wasn't wasting $140, $30 an hour to be connected. And this was at a very slow transmission rate. So I stumbled into this group called the Literary Forum, which was full of people who liked books. And there were a number of writers there in every stage of development, from beginning writers to multi-published people. And there were a lot of people who didn't write but liked to talk to writers, a lot of people who just liked to discuss books, you know. Anyway, it was, for someone like me, it was like a 24-hour floating literary cocktail party and the ideal social life. So I signed up immediately, got automated software so I didn't go broke doing it, and, you know, started hanging around at the Lit Forum. And that was what I did, you know, when I was taking a break between bits and pieces of writing. I early on started writing in the middle of the night. I had learned fairly soon on that no matter what I'm writing, it sticks about 2/3 of the way down the page. Well, everybody hits this place, and then most people will just get up and get a cup of coffee, take the dog for a walk, go to the bathroom, go shopping. Often they don't come back, which is why they don't finish their books. But, well, I couldn't do that because I was being paid to write this stuff. And so I had to keep producing stuff. So I quickly learned I would start with the most boring thing, which was usually a grant proposal, horrible stuff. And I would write that until it stuck. And then without even worrying about what came next, I would immediately reach for the next thing on my pile of software reviews, and I would start that. So I would get as far as I could with that, and then I'd check back with the grant proposal. If that was still stuck, it usually was, I'd pull up the scene of the novel that I was working on and start on that. And so I would have 3 or 4 different documents that I was working on during that evening, and I would just cycle through and write whichever one was unstuck at that moment and come back and forth. And, you know, so I was very productive. I was just productive in 4 different directions at once, which, you know, drives some people crazy, but that's what worked for me. And so I just suggested as an alternative, if you're working on something and you're not getting anywhere, you know, switch to something else in the same book, something else completely. If it's writing, it will contribute to your overall effort. You know, nothing you write is ever a waste, including the stuff you throw away. Everything oils your synapses and makes it easier to find the next word. For a year or so before I decided to write a book. And I was, as I say, not telling anybody what I was doing. Part of this was because I'd seen a number of people come through this place talking about what they were going to do. And they do all kinds of research, and they never ever wrote a word. You know, you could go for a year watching people and they would never write a word. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to, you know, write the book, and I'm going to finish the book, and then I'll decide if I want to tell anybody about it or not. So I made only 2 rules for myself. Said I will do the best that I can every single day with the writing, even though this is a practice book. I don't mean to show it to people. It has to be the best I can do, because how else will I get any better? The second resolution was I will finish it, no matter how bad I think it is, because I need to know what it takes to write a whole book. And I knew where I was starting, because I went to Scotland in the 18th century, and I had a time-traveling English woman who, you know, spoke for herself. I was not telling anyone, and I knew if I didn't do it right then, I might never do it. So I didn't say anything. I just kept writing. But one night, after I'd been at it, you know, 8 or 9 months, I was talking to someone on CompuServe. He was a gentleman, and we were having a back and forth argument about what it feels like to be pregnant. And he said, well, can you tell me what it's like? And I said, I can, yes. There's this little piece that I wrote a few months ago, in which a woman explains to her brother in some detail what it's like to be pregnant. I said, that's pretty good, concise explanation, so I'll put it in the library here. So I did, and everyone who had been following the argument went and read this piece, and they all kept rushing back. I said, this is great, what is it? And I said, I don't know. And I said, well, where's the beginning? And I said, I haven't written that yet. And they said, well, put up some more of it. This is fascinating. I write in disconnected bits and pieces, which gradually grow feet and crawl toward each other as I get closer. And anyway, so I had lots of these little disconnected scenes. So when I had one that was fairly complete, I would put it up for them, and they got more and more excited. And they would talk to each other and say, oh, Diana has a new chunk, have you read it yet? And people would say, what's a chunk? And they'd say, oh, you have to read this. And so more and more people were reading them. And, you know, for someone who has never exposed their fiction to the public gaze, to have somebody actually want to read what you write, this is better than heroin. You know, heroin, they tell me this is better. I would take every opportunity, you know, every 2 or 3 months when I had peace, I'd put it up. As I said, they got more and more excited, and they began saying, this is cool, you should try it.